Hey, it's Brooks at Defense University, and today I wanted to talk to you real quick about tech support questions and some of the common things that you got to think about. Some of this stuff at the beginning is going to be kind of generic, and then the other things are going to go into the specifics of a particular tech call that I had today, which is my customer has a Doorking 1835 and the gate is being held open for long periods of time. My customer calls me, I turn everything off, I turn everything back on, and everything starts to work again. So, right off the top, that in itself should be an indicator of what possibly could be the issue. What equipment is out there that will hold the gate open, but when it turns off and turns back on, does not go to that same state in the control of the relay. So, just some generic things right off the top. When you're going to a property and you have a technical question or an intermittent issue that you're trying to deal with, you should be observing really before you even get to the property. A particular example that I have dealt with in the past, it's not as common now because there's a lot of backups and data communication more reliable. But when we routinely had connection issues with gate operators, we would look off-site just as much as on-site during that initial inspection, trying to figure out what the problem is. So as you're driving up to the property, if you see a telecom service provider down the street pulling wire down the poles or possibly feeding wire underground, that might be a reason why your customers' connections are intermittent or they have no connection at all, those types of things. They generally will not shut down service in an area without notice. So in an emergency situation, you might find that it is shut down, the data communication shut down from one device to the other just because of whatever service that they're doing. So you need to be observing prior to you get to the location. So just observe. And I'm going to go over these, but these are just kind of my ideas that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. You could actually put above that or 1A of observing is the number of, not number, but the questions that you ask prior to getting onto the property. If it's a property that you regularly deal with, most of the time, if you're there once every 2 weeks, once a month, you're going to be able to see things that have changed, notice things that's changed, remember where things got moved to from one site to the other, were updated on any existing plans for service, any service that's going on the property. But if this is a new property or just in general, you need to ask questions. So, has any work being performed, been performed or being performed on the job site or in that local area? You could have something as simple as irrigation knockout communication from the telephone entry or the access control panel, or in this case, or in some cases, the automatic gate operator. Their hard lines, the power. Power is always a key issue that you're looking at when you're looking at automatic gates. Not just the incoming power, but the power that is supposed to be at a device and what that looks like in relationship to the specifications that the manufacturer has. So asking questions such as any work being done is important. You might be able to save yourself some time. Back in the day, we would have, and I guess it still happens every once in a while now, we'll have a manufacturer, or we'll have a management company that will change locations, or you'll have a property that changes management companies and therefore certain bills don't get paid. If you just have one property, you most likely know whether you guys have paid that bill, but you got to understand these management companies may have 30 or 40 properties that are assigned to just one management person, and they may not off the top of their head be able to go, oh, did this AT&T bill get paid? Did this water bill get paid, or whatever? So asking as many questions as you can is helpful. Now, when you're on site and you're dealing with access control equipment, now in this case, I'm going to give you a breakdown of this one particular tech call, and this will give you some ideas you need to think of when you're actually going out to the job site, or even in the asking question phase, observing phase, that you may be able to use when you're out there working on a job site. So anyways, this guy had an 1835, a Doorking 1835, and he had a Surefire wireless transmitter receiver and a Surefire wireless transmitter receiver. So I'm just going to put RF on here and RF. So these are both transceivers, so they transmit and receive data wirelessly. So in the middle, I'm just going to put RF, just so we know that there's not a hard wire in here. We're going to treat this in the diagnostic phase as though it is hardwired, but there are some things that can trip you up if you're not paying attention to it, and we'll get into it in a second. And then they just have a gate operator, and I believe it's an SL3000, one of the best gate operators, if not the best gate operator ever made. Why they don't make them like that anymore, I have no idea. So in this particular scenario, let's go ahead and write, we've got we're going to write transactions, we're going to write settings. Under settings, we're going to write times, or just time, and then time zones. And these are some things that I'm thinking of off the top of my head that could be a problem. And then over here, we're always going to check our power. And then in this case, as opposed to a hard wire being directly to the gate operator or the device under control, we just got them going directly to these transceivers that will send communication, data communication, like a long form data communication, Wiegand data, serial data, different types of protocols that it'll send wirelessly and securely. And then on the other side, so we just have little fluffy clouds that this actually is sending through. It's just sending through the air. And then on the other transceiver side, we have the communication to tell this device to actually open up. And again, this is a gate operator right here. So it's labeled in the inside of the gate operator as strike open. So I'll write it backwards. Open strike. So this is the basic setup for being able to actually control this gate open. Now, how it does it, how the 1835 telephone entry, so we're just going to write telephone entry above this, how that tells the gate operator to open, not be a hardwired or wireless, not that, but how it tells it, whether it be a credential from a directory code, from an RFID device such as a toll tag reader or a Wiegand device, or remote control such as, this could kind of be similar to a directory code as well too, but a remote control possibly from another location. And then you even have like the keypad from the front. Okay. So I wrote power on each one of these directly related to the power incoming on the device. It's one of the most basic things to test, which is power and power with load. And if you ever come behind one of my jobs, you'll actually see that I'll document this stuff on gate operators, and typically not with power under load for the access control equipment, but I will write the power. The reason why power under a load is not crucial for me to document, it is important, but crucial for me to document, is that when one of these devices activates, meaning it's drawing probably the most current that it will actually draw, it's only just a few millivolts. So it's quite possible, depending upon the multimeter that you have or the setting that you have your multimeter on, that you actually don't see any fluctuation in voltage drop when it actually triggers a relay. The power that's consumed is very, very low. So typically on my gate operator, I'll log both of these, and if you don't have them logged, which in a majority of jobs you won't, go ahead and log them, what your test is on the device. So the next service technician that comes behind you and says, okay, this gate operator has 110 volts incoming AC and 109 volts with load. Me personally, you're right on the borderline of it actually being the correct voltage for some gate operators. So I would start to be concerned with that. However, if it had been working 10 years at that same power voltage and I don't see a significant voltage drop and the motor's not getting too hot, so on and so forth, I may not be worried about that. But this is something that I want to document and want to see on a gate operator, and then just your incoming power on all your accessories and your electronic access control. So these are common things that you want to check. If things were acting really weird, such as I see power, I see LEDs on any of these control boards dimming and coming back to a full power. If I see intermittent activity, such as it turning off and turning back on, I might immediately go to checking power on the accessories as well too. But it's easy enough to check, and most likely the technician that you call to help with tech support for you is going to ask what the incoming voltage is. So it doesn't hurt at each one of these locations. You're going over and taking off the cover anyway. You're going over to inspect the wire anyway. Just go ahead and throw your multimeter on it. It's going to take, for these 4 devices, it would probably take an extra minute and a half, depending upon how far they are apart from each other and how they're actually secured in a housing. So anyways, power is one of the things that I actually check, and I want to check it under a load, and I want to check it without a load, depending upon the device that it is. And then more importantly, I want to document it as well too. So now that we've got the basic system set up and you kind of understand some things that you want to think about and talk about before you get to the job with the tenant and with your other technicians that may be familiar with the property, familiar with the product, or just have the experience to know, which is really why people call me, because I haven't been in California, I haven't serviced that, I haven't been to the East Coast and service stuff like that. So people will generally call basically for this basic knowledge and not firsthand property knowledge. And that's basically what I was giving this technician here. So the problem was gate stuck open. I go to the property, the technician goes to the property, turns everything off, turns it back on, and then the gate closes fine. That in itself may be a clue for me to check my Surefire systems, because the Surefire system, if it loses power and then power comes back on, does the relay go to that same state? Meaning it was closed before, and now that I've turned it off and turned it back on, does it go back to a closed state? And you'll find that some keypads and some of these devices, accessories will do that, and they should do that in my opinion. Just because you lose power and power comes back on, you still want the gate closed. The telephone entry is telling the gate to stay, or excuse me, I said closed, but open. You still want the gate open and the circuit to be closed. So the telephone entry is telling that no matter whether it's 5 o'clock and you lose power, or it's 5 o'clock and the power is still on. If you lose power and it comes back on during the time zone, you want the circuit to be closed and the gate to be open. So let's go ahead and simulate that. If I take power off the Surefire and power it back on, will this actually go back to a closed state, keeping the gate operator open? Again, gate stuck open, that's our problem. If I turn the 1835 off and it's on a schedule, then I turn it back on, does the gate go back to open? So in these two scenarios, if the gate went back to open, right, and you turn them all off, let's start from the beginning real quick. You go to the property, gate stuck open, customer called and said, hey, the gate's been stuck open all day. And you go to the access control system, not the gate operator system, you go to the access control system, you turn everything off, the gate's closed, you turn everything back on, the gate's open, then we know that our problem most likely is in one of these, and it's most likely not a malfunction, but that will be subjective depending upon your experience with equipment, and it goes back to an open state. So the gate's stuck open. So that right there, simulating a fault, could be one way that you find out, is the problem here or is it in the gate opener? If that happens, if the gate closes by you turning everything off, would you look in the gate operator or would you look in one of these devices, accessories holding it open? Now, if the gate stayed open, is it fair to say that these aren't the problem? Well, it's hard to say. It could be because maybe you didn't leave the gate closed. Maybe you didn't leave these circuits off long enough. Maybe these stay, it's a toggle relay, and maybe these actually stay closed even with power off, therefore the gates would be stuck open. Maybe there's a device that's actually hooked up to this that's powered off the same power as this, but not in the communication circuit as this. So there's a lot of different scenarios that you have to think of, and recreating the problem is helpful. And we're going to get to one thing that you can do to see where this is going. And keep in mind, there actually, now here's one thing that I'm going to bring up here in a minute. They actually had another gate operator out here as well too. That was, from what I understood, hooked up to possibly the second relay in the telephone entry. So when I'm thinking of all of that, if I'm on site, I'm on power, I'm checking power, I'm checking the wiring connections, I'm pulling on the wire, I'm seeing if there's possibly any loose wire, any frayed wire that possibly is mechanically shorting over to one of the other wires and causing a short, therefore keeping the gate stuck open. I'm going to go in and the first thing I'm going to think about is communication. Where are they communicating with the telephone entry from? Is it a single unit? Is it through the cloud? Is it a direct connect? Is it over plain old telephone service? And that right there, just the communication of it would possibly help go down the path of diagnosing it. What I would want to look at in the communication is this particular system has a feature that will hold the gates open while the database is being uploaded. So if that's the case, are they staying on longer than they should? Are they monitoring something with the gate and staying logged on because they need to? Are they staying logged on because it's an accident? Do they have the check mark that says disconnect after communication sent? So on and so forth. And that's just off the top of my head. That they could have more features or possibly deprecated one of those features in the latest version of software. But at one point in time, they had the feature to would hold the gates open if you were actually sending data to it. That way, from what I understood, is if you actually pulled up to the telephone entry and tried to use it, you would still be able to get in the gate because it would lock the gate open. So if they're staying on too long, is that holding it? So that's the communication part I was talking about for the devices. Now we're talking about specifically for the 1835. Second thing I would look at is transactions. Transactions, these steps may be before even the power. I'm going to go to that programming computer and I'm going to see what's actually going on with it. So I would, first thing I would do, all right, now we're going to get into the mechanics of this. It's going a little bit longer than I thought, but this is very important. First thing that you're going to do is back up everything. I would back it up to a USB drive, and then I would back it up locally on their computer and label the file do not use. There's some other things that most likely, if I've been to the property before, I'm going to do. such as create an access control file on their computer that has IP addresses, telephone numbers, contact information, administrative, IT administrative for that property, and so on. So most likely there's a file that's already created on the desktop. If I've been there, I'm going to open up another file that says backup, do not use. I'm going to back up everything in the database directly to that, and then I'm going to back it up to a USB drive if I think that there's possibly something funky going on with the property. If the customer or management's giving me excessive resistance about changing a couple of things or demanding that I buy a couple of things for it to specify or to change in the system, like, hey, you should buy this control board. I read online that this is it, which we're more than happy to do. But if they're trying to force that on you, I might back up the database to a USB drive because I've already started out with an adversarial relationship with the management staff or the property ownership. So having it offsite is very helpful for a number of reasons. I mean, Friday at 4 o'clock, if you start changing stuff and they're logged onto the cloud and all of a sudden they upload the wrong database, you've got one in your pocket, log onto it, upload it. So the communication between the devices is just a concern. Some telephone entry systems will not have that. Transactions, I'm going to look at transactions and I'm going to look at settings for the device. I want to download all the settings. What schedules does it have? What schedules does it have? What relays are they on? What time zones are they on? And it's going to have all that information in there, possibly IP addresses and things of that nature as well too. And then that's your settings and transactions. Transactions is going to tell me the last time that the gate held open, hopefully. Some access control systems, and I believe it in this 1835 that it will log that it actually triggered the gate open. I could be wrong. But one thing that the old 1835 does, and I'm not sure if they've changed this in software since last I've seen it, is it doesn't record unknown transactions. It's one of the biggest flaws in access control systems that I see on a regular basis. I want to see the unknown. This is an argument that I get into with a lot of other instructors where they will go, yeah, but that's 1 in a million. Oh, you're not going to deal with that. Oh, I've been in the business for 40 years. This is always my favorite, and I've said it every once in a while too. I've been in the business for 40 years, and I've never seen that. Okay, there, boomer. So anyways, as I say that with a gray beard. So anyways, the thing with the, what was I talking about? I've been in the business for 40 years. Get back to, I lost my train of thought. You'll see it's weird in the video. But anyways, I've been in the business for so long and I've never seen that. The reason why we are on that property is probably one of two things in our day-to-day business as service technicians. Is it's a brand new install or it's service because something is wrong. You do have maintenance. That's what I was trying to say, scheduled service. You do have scheduled service and stuff where you're out there that nothing's wrong, but the equipment's already been installed. But you're out there to do service, right, for something that is wrong. It's the 1 in a million that we're looking at. And when people tell technicians that, oh, you'll never come across this, and you're calling them, asking them for help because you've come across this, it's one of the biggest things that we have to get out of the teaching part of this business. We're there for the 1 in a million. This is 1 in a million. Think about it. Somebody from another state that took one of my classes a year ago is calling me up trying to figure this out. Basically trying to get a second set of ears and eyes on it. So with that in mind, we're out there because of the 1 in a million. So if I say that this is like this in old software, but it's not now, so don't worry about it, you'll never see it. If I were to say that, the next job that you go to, you'll actually see it. So I want to, in those settings, I want to look at time zones. I want to look at relay connections, as I said before. I want to see how the gate is actually being opened. Is it being opened by key fob? Is it being opened by directory codes and so on? It's quite possible that you come, not in this system, I don't believe that it has it, you come up to a problem where the gate's stuck open, and right before the gate's stuck open, you see a particular card number getting read into the system. So let's just say it's 26 weekend without a facility code. So 12345 000, you see opening door number 1. And every time after door number 1, you get no transactions until the gate actually gets closed. Well, is it possible that that tag has a hold open command as a feature? For instance, if you have just one of these master keys and you have somebody servicing the property, you could send that out with, or the service maintenance supervisor can have that card and actually go hit all the doors that he wants open while there's something being performed on the site. But you have to look at those, and these people change throughout their properties on a regular basis. So what one guy thought it was on one property is not how it is. So again, we're dealing with the 1 in a million, and going through these transactions will be very helpful. You don't necessarily have to look at all of them on site, but you need to download all of them. And I know on some of these older systems that are 36.6 kilobits per second, I know it sucks. Have something else to do. Start on this at the beginning and then go out and check your power to actually see if you can find it. And while this is backing up and downloading, you can go out and start checking your power. So those are some of the things I would do right off the bat. And then now what I was going through with this was, let's start, and there's a couple of different philosophies on this. Let's start at one end or the other and start disconnecting equipment to see if we can get the equipment to operate normally, and then we can start and go backwards from there. So one philosophy is start from either end, see if we have a problem, and the other philosophy is actually start from the middle and then go down. Both of them are logical. The theory about the one in the middle is it cuts out half of it. Right? Once you find, oh, it's working here, but it's not working here, then you know that you got to go down. And in theory, you have less pieces of equipment. Now, and we're not talking about infrastructure. Infrastructure is a whole nother thing. You could have bad wiring, and you might find that you have bad wiring after this, but maybe you can use another pair or whatever the case may be. So in this case, I'm going to start from my 1835. Let's say I went through all of this stuff and I found it to be okay. Right? I found that I didn't see anything weird in transactions. I didn't see that they were staying logged on for too long, and so on. You know, everything that I see, no time zones, no weird transaction things, no crazy power on, power off cycles or anything like that, which could freak out the equipment or freak out the gate operator. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to 1835. In this case, I might check my power. But let's say I did check my power and I was at 17 volts on the power coming in the bottom, and I was 17 volts or whatever it's supposed to be on my accessory side, and they weren't the same power supply. If I start to see weird problems and the power's being jumped from one side to the other on the 835, I start to think about isolating my power, just because of the voltage drops that you might get or current surges that you might get, all causing that thing the telephone entry to do weird things. So let's say I got my power good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my strike, and this is just off of relay 1. So this is relay number 1, and this is going to be normally open and common. I know you can't see that, but I'm just doing it for my purposes. So let's say we have normally open and common. I'm going to take my multimeter and double check to see if that's shorted right there. And if I get a solid 1 or 2 or 3 ohms out of that relay 1, I'm actually in pretty good shape. I know that there's a dead short. Now the question is where's the dead short? Is the dead short being caused by the relay on the 1835, or is the dead short further on down? Well, the easiest way to check that out is just to pull one of the wires out. If you pull one of the wires out and that short goes away, that short is being shorted by something else in the actual system. So now I'm going to follow that process all the way down. I'm already here to the Surefire system. I'm going to pull my, I'm going to test my power, make sure my power is good, and then I'm going to pull one of my relay wires off. Now, each one of these pieces of equipment are most likely going to have an LED or some kind of indicator that the relay is active. I'm not sure on the older 1835s if that had that or not, but it's going to show that a relay is active. So visually, you might go, okay, well, it shows that a relay is closed, so I won't go any further past this. I know that it's from here on back because this relay is closed. Well, there could be a malfunction and all the LEDs could be on and it's deceiving you, not knowing that that's what it is, that it's actually a malfunction. So again, with these wires connected again, I'm going to unplug one of these wires. And if my continuity stays the same on the wires but not on the relay, then I know it's from here to here. Well, hold on. I just said it's got to be from here to here if the relay is closed or not closed and I'm still getting continuity on these wires. Well, it's got to be coming from something else, right? Well, if I unplug this and my wires are still closed together, but they're not connected to any equipment, the problem very well could be actually in the wiring, or it could be that something else is connected to this that you don't know what it is. It could be a Knox lock, it could be a wireless receiver that's connected to this relay, it could be third-party access control equipment, it could be the Amazon device that's connected to it, and all of those things are things that you're going to have to keep an open mind about and going, oh, it can't be that. When you say it can't be that, it's going to be one of those things where it actually possibly could be. So you got to be careful with underthinking it. You have to overthink these things sometimes and go through all those weird scenarios. Well, the Amazon equipment's not connected here, so it can't be that. Well, Amazon's a huge company. They send 3 guys out to put 3 different receivers in, or maybe FedEx has their own receiver and they're tying into our stupid wires somewhere, which they shouldn't be. So it could be something along those lines, or it could be bad infrastructure. And to find out if it's bad infrastructure, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 wires, I'm going to twist them together, and then I'm going to come down here with my black and red lead off my multimeter. I'm going to put it on ohms, and let's say this is a 100-foot 18 gauge stranded copper. I'm going to expect to probably see somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 ohms. It could be, I want to see it less than 5, but it very well could be 0.5 or 1 or 2 or 3. Once I start seeing 5 and 6 ohms, then I start to think, well, how much of that resistance is giving me a problem in this 100 feet? Well, if I'm only putting out 5 volts out of one of these relays, then it very well could, it's actually an input. If I'm only putting 5 volts out of the output and only getting 3 volts back at the input, the 1835 may not recognize that that signal is actually closed. So I'm going to test my resistance, and if I get less than 5 ohms, then I'm going to go, okay, well, it's possibly not in the wire. If that happens throughout all of these phases that I start to question the wire, run a wire directly from 1835 into the gate operator. I'm going to make it secure for a couple of weeks and go, hey, did you have any problem after 2 weeks? If the problem goes away, you know that it's somewhere in your Surefire system or somewhere in the infrastructure of those wires, okay? And the most likely the reason why you have a Surefire system is because the distance between the 1835 and the SL3000 is obstructed, cost prohibitive, or one of those things that would cause you not to actually run a wire. Sometimes you can run a wire fairly easy if there were conduit there, but after they put pavers down and stuff like that, you're kind of stuck. So if that was it, my wiring, I would just run a wire directly from here to there or here to the gate operator, bypass everything and see what I got. So now we've come to the Surefire. Let's say everything checks out okay right there. All right. Now I got Surefire to Surefire. When I have a closed signal that's supposed to be transmitted here, what's my resistance, my DC resistance here? Is it a dead short right here? If it's a dead short right here, is it a dead short right here at this 1830? Well, it could be. But is it being caused because there is a malfunction right there, or is it being caused because this is actually dead shorted? I'm going to take one of these leads off of my Surefire, and then if I still got a closed signal over here, it's not likely that the input over here is doing anything that's closing it itself under normal operation, under a malfunction, because it's SL3000, the best gate operator ever made. You just take the control board off, look at the back, look at the front, see if there's any burnt marks, and go from there. So if I've got something shorted here, you could actually have no wires here, and something that's supposed to be plus 5 volts and 0 volts over here now has plus 5 volts over here. And if you were to test it, it would actually be 0 volts because you're just showing the difference in potential, but I'm not going to go down that very long. That right there, if you see plus 5 volts and 0 volts on the input, in this case, let's call it strike open, that's exactly what you should see. If you see 0 volts, then you know you've got a problem because something's shorted on the inside. So that is a general aspect of some things that I would check. However, you still have your Knox lock. You still have your emergency service ingress. You have third party. These are all normal operation. And apparently you spell normal with a D. These are all normal operation. Okay? These aren't malfunctions, and these ideally is what you would like to find, because those you've got an answer for. Putting a wire across the ground, you don't have an answer for them. Now, what should have happened in this particular scenario if the technician went through all of this, it just happens to be he, if he or she went through all of this, still couldn't find out why it stuck open, turned it off, turned it back on, everything started working just fine. What in this system, now there's a trick, I mentioned it earlier, what in this system would you do? Okay. On this property, that's actually a better question. On this property, what would you do? Now, if you remember earlier, and that was like 36 minutes ago, I mentioned that there's actually another gate on here. So now that you know that there's another duplicate setup of everything from here over, what would you do? Swap these with the other system, swap the control board, or swap the control board with the other system. If you had another 1835, these boards aren't that hard to take out. You could take the 1835 boards and swap them over, okay? Now, that's if you had duplicate systems. Or what you could do is if you had a new stock on your truck, you could replace this system, reprogram it to whatever it needs to be programmed to, and then or take this control board out and swap it with a new one. The reason why I keep saying or is because you want to change one thing at a time. Okay, there may be applications where you do change 3 or 4 things: unlimited budget, high security. They already have the equipment in stock, and you're swapping it with their equipment, and so on. But in this case, in a normal situation, what you're going to do is you're going to take this out of the system, put it on the other side, and then put the other side to here, and you're going to document it all. Take this control board, put it on the other access control system, swap them out, and you're going to document it. You're going to write the date, what your name is, what the name of your company is, you're going to write your phone number, and then you're going to write what it is at the time you were going to swap it out. Not what is it now when you leave the property. You're going to document what it is at the time that you're pulling it out, okay? It is east entry. You're going to take the east entry and you're going to put it in the west entry. And then you're going to put swapped to west side 10/24/2024, okay? That is the documentation part. Just do one thing at a time. Now, for all of you expert gate technicians and access control technicians, let's say you didn't have a duplicate of this system. It was just a one-entry system. You didn't have a duplicate. You didn't have any spare parts. You didn't have any of that. What's the one thing that you could do in this system? There's actually a couple. One thing in this system that you could just change one thing, and it would isolate the other equipment, or some of the other equipment, I should say. So in an 1835, if you had one gate operator that continually got stuck open, you looked at the schedule, you looked at everything, what would you do? You could take relay 1, the input from the connection from input 1, and swap it over to 2. You could take, that's one thing that you could do. If your wireless system had 2 relays, you could swap those. In this case, maybe you could do both at the same time. But again, we're trying to isolate the problem. If it fixes the problem and you never have to go back, again, you don't really care. You just want to get the problem fixed. And that could be a solution, but you never know where the problem is. And now 6 months from now, you come back because this had over voltage and was continually damaging the relay. And now that you're activating a second relay on there, that could be, the reason why it's getting burnt out, because the contact is continuing to close with too much voltage running through it or being triggered by or something along those lines. Again, that's our job. I don't think I said this before. That's our job. We're replacement technicians. We're not diagnosing on a component level. So swapping these out, swapping the wires out to a second relay would be good in this if the system provided. What about on the gate operator? The gate operator you could change to another input. You could change it to, from strike open, you could change it to exit. You could isolate it to possibly a second board, depending upon if it has more than one board. Like a Omni board, or not an Omni board, Omni option. I think that has an input in it. You could do a couple different things. You just isolate it from where it's at. And that right there, document the heck out of it, take pictures of it, because again, if we're having an adversarial relationship with management, staff, or ownership, we need to be able to document and take pictures to see if anything's changed. In this particular property, I was told specifically the customer was not all that cooperative. So that's what you could do if it's a single system. Change the relays, change the in and outs, change the in over here, and those would all help you isolate them to individual components. You may have something mechanical. You may have something that's electromechanical. You may have something that's electronic. The stuff that we talked about for the most part was the electronic stuff. But all of those are valid points. Those are all things that I would look at. And you might be able to find the problem in there. If it's electrical or something like that, or it's separate from all this, maybe there's power surges or lightning strikes or something like that that's just causing this freak occurrence. Video surveillance would help. So get them involved with checking their video surveillance. A lot of properties have that now, and see if you can find out what it is. I can tell you that from personal experience, the video thing is more reassuring than it is problem solving. To say that, hey, we looked at it. I've only had one time, which probably means 2 or 3 times that I can remember, where we went through changing boards, changing motors, swapping boards, swapping motors, changing start capacitors, all kinds of crazy stuff, with the exception of replacing the gate operator and the infrastructure. And then I was like, well, have they looked at their cameras? Sure enough, we go look at their cameras. Somebody wasn't supposed to be on the property, or somebody's friend was not supposed to be on the property. And one of those people were out there pulling on the gate at 2 o'clock at night after it opened. And they would come out there and pull on it and trip the reverse sensor. And then they would that would trigger the gate to stay open until it was reset from the control board. So we didn't know that until we looked at the video surveillance, and those are those 1 in a million things that you've got to use. So hopefully this gives you some examples of things to do. So recap, what we want to do is we want to ask questions before we actually go to the property. Ask as many questions as you can. Do you have any work on site? When's the last time it worked? Does this fail regularly? Who finds out that it fails? Is it the staff? Is it management? Is it a third party? What time does it fail on a regular basis? What time does your irrigation kick on? So on and so forth. And then you're going to observe before you even get on the property. Is there anything going on down the street that may affect communications? Is there anything going on down the street that actually may trigger a loop? If you have somebody that's in a construction site right after, or construction site right next to the property, and they keep slamming down big dumpsters, it's possible that the vibration in the ground could actually trigger a loop. And then when you get out there, you want to look at what that programming computer's doing. Even if it's in the cloud or if it's just a single computer on some of these older systems, that's what you'll find. You want to back up the database, you want to download transactions, and you want to download settings. You want to download everything that you can. If it's an adversarial relationship, download it to a USB drive that you always have a copy to. If you're cool with the property, make sure that you create an access control folder on the desktop that says do not use, do not open, and then create a backup folder that says do not use, do not open, and log all your documents, your IP addresses, all that stuff. And then when you're looking at transactions, is there a transaction that actually happens before this failure or happens afterwards that you see a particular card that possibly is a hold open card? Look at settings. Maybe you have a time zone set. Maybe you have your time wrong on the computer, so your time zones for your hold open schedules trigger at the wrong time. You definitely take a look at what types of devices are being used before that. Is the keypad, somebody always uses the keypad and this triggers it open? Is there something in software that's actually latching that one code and toggling the others? Is it RFID system, remote, keypad, those types of things, all that stuff you look at. And then when it comes to the hardware, double check your power with load, power without load, and then document that time, date, the person who it was, sometimes your company and sometimes your phone number and all that stuff. You want not on your electronic devices, maybe power under load. You won't, depending upon your meter, you won't even see much of a change if it's only pulling 80 milliamps. There might not be a voltage drop. And then incoming power on your gate operator, you want to be 6%, no more than 6% over, no more than 10% below. And then you start separating components, just like you're diagnosing anything else. You start pulling out a photo eye if you think that the photo eye is the issue. You take your edge off, take your receiver off, and so forth. Your edge receiver off, and so forth. And then you just start unplugging the systems. You could start in the middle or you could start at the end. I'm just going to start most likely where I think that the problem is. I unplug everything from the equipment and I still have a dead short in my wire. Then you possibly have a third-party device that's actually triggering it that you don't know where it's at, or you have compromised infrastructure, and that's where your insulation tester, your multimeter, and underground wire tester will come in handy. And if you don't have those, you need to get those. And then you start separating these systems. If you take all the stuff off and the gate starts to open and close as normal, then hey, we've got something from here to here. If you take the access control stuff off and something's still closed, but you could take the equipment off the gate operator, or something's still open, you can take the stuff off the gate operator and it closes, maybe you've got problems in your infrastructure, whether it be wire or wireless. Take equipment from the other equipment and swap it out in here. We want to just swap one thing at a time because, again, we're trying to isolate and diagnose the problem. If you think that it's infrastructure and you have the ability to run a wire over to the gate operator directly to the access control panel, the biggest problem with that is one, physical, and then two, what you're going to have to do with that wire in order to make sure that it's secure and not a trip hazard. It is most likely only sending 5 volts in general. It could be 3 volts, but it's most likely only sending 5 volts. We don't have to worry about the wire getting shorted. That's why if I'm going to do it, I'm going to direct burial wire, strap it down across the drive, put yellow tape on it, and then just make sure that the management lets everybody know. It's still somewhat of a trip hazard, but no more than a rock and on the sidewalk. So that's a recap of all the stuff that I would be thinking about doing. And if you did all of those things and well documented, you could justify your time. But be cautious about not documenting this stuff, whether it be with video, with still pictures, or with writing. I do a lot of my stuff on video now. I don't write as much anymore, so I do a lot of stuff on video. Document as much stuff as you can. And at the very least, if you can't solve it, you can jump on one of the forums or call somebody, the manufacturer, or call somebody else and say, hey, this is all the stuff that I've done. Send them the video, send them the pictures. If you don't have cloud service, create an Instagram account right now, record the video to Instagram, and then tell the manufacturer to look at the video. And that's the way I do it for quick use anyway. So this is supposed to be a short video, but I went a little in depth, and hopefully that recap stuff, I'll put in there that the last 5 minutes is the recap. That's kind of a gist of what it is. But you really need to be documenting, and you really need to use all your senses as best you can, because all 5 senses. If you've got a battery that's been blown up in that gate operator or possibly an access control panel, you can sometimes taste that acidity in the air. If you've got a belt that some pulleys that aren't realigned and they're messing the belt up, you could actually smell that burning rubber in the air. So you literally want to use all 5 of your senses within reason. You know, obviously, if you feel heat coming off the motor, you don't have to verify that by touching your hand on the motor. That's where your IR thermometer comes in, and so on. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some practical stuff that you could do out in the field. And some of these items we actually test here at Defense University, hands-on and in theory. And over 2025, we're going to be doing some digital online classes for you, as well as continuing with our hands-on. Did I say digital hands-on? It's true that they're hands-on, but not the digital part. We actually send you some equipment and you get to follow along during class. And then we still have our hands-on classes. So fenceuniversity.com, you can go to the little hamburger, little 3 lines, click on that, hit subscribe, and then that'll give you an update of all the classes that we've got going on. Plus it'll give you our free newsletter as well. Thank you for watching. Sorry it was so long.